This one is called A Night at Bubby's. I never thought my paternal grandmother, Bubby Mary, liked me very much, even though every time I saw her 2 or 3 times a year, she would hold out her arms saying, "Who loves you the most in the world? Who loves you the most in the world?" I always wanted to respond, "Not you." But Beauty told me in certain situations, honesty is not the best policy. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. I didn't want to catch any flies, but I always let Bubby hug me and squeeze my cheeks until they were bright red and stung with pain. Bubby loves me the most in the world, I would say, knowing I was not really being truthful. But our visits were so far and few between that I would force myself to smile instead of wince in pain. My 2 grandmothers lived near each other on the north side of Chicago, but the way they felt about me were worlds apart. Beauty could never get enough of me and insisted that I spend every weekend at her house, so I slept over most Friday and Saturdays. I rarely saw Bubby, and she only invited me to sleep at her house once, and only once when Beauty and Papa had a fancy wedding to attend, and my parents were in Africa on a safari. Arriving at Bubby's with a box of jelly fruit slices and my class picture, I tried to smile brightly as Bubby hugged me. "Shana Meidalach, Shana Meidalach, beautiful girl, who loves you the most in the world?" I hugged her, and Beauty admired the table set with gefilte fish, chopped liver, and homemade challah braided with 6 strands. After instructing us to take off our shoes, Bubby Mary gave me and Beauty each a warm piece of challah to snack on. Then both my grandmothers disappeared into the avocado green tile kitchen and began speaking in Yiddish. When they returned to the living room, I could tell Beauty looked a little uncomfortable. Bubby explained that she was really happy to have me spend the night, but some of her friends from shul wanted to come over for a game of cards. After dinner, I would need to sit in the den where I could have dessert and watch the Tom Jones Variety Special while she played a couple rounds of Jim Rummy and Canasta. Beauty looked at me. I could tell she wanted to say something reassuring, but Papa, who hated to wait, was outside blowing the horn nonstop. "I'll call you from the payphone in the powder room. Enjoy all Bubby's delicious foods." "We'll be fine. Maybe we can even fatten her up a little bit." My heart sank watching the door close behind Beauty. "You are such a little thing, such a little thing," Bubby kept saying to me as she winked at me while serving me dish after dish. "I made all your daddy's favorites." I kept complimenting on Bubby on how yummy everything tasted, but I was not used to eating so much food at one time, and my stomach was beginning to hurt. But the food kept coming. It was so hard to distinguish one dish from the next that I hardly had a chance to swallow one thing before my plate was filled again. "Just a little more," she kept saying. She kept saying food is meant to be eaten, not wasted. I remember my dad saying he felt like a stuffed turkey every time he was at Bubby's house. "Unfortunately, willpower and I are not closely related," he would explain as he joyfully indulged without coming up for air. But other than holidays, we didn't visit Bubby very much. My dad said he felt more comfortable at Beauty's house. She always made a big deal over him, laughing at his jokes, telling him how brilliant he was, and displaying all the articles from the trade magazines. My dad was a rising star in the ad industry. But Bubby was confused about what he did for a living and was disappointed that he did not have a regular job like his brother Melvin, who was an accountant. I didn't know what an accountant was, but I knew my dad's job was super fun as he got to work with Tony the Tiger and the Pillsbury Doughboy. Bubby was not impressed. "A Jewish boy should be a lawyer or a doctor." Even when my dad was a child, he did things she did not understand, like creating satirical comic books or questioning why they had 2 different sets of dishes and opened the light on Shabbat when they strictly forbade it. Not knowing how to relate to him, she fed him constantly. Bonding over roast tongue, pickled herring, and roast cabbage made both of them feel closer to each other. But then when he was in the 6th grade, my dad got beat up by a bunch of bullies who jumped him from behind, hitting him with lead pipes until he was unconscious. "Fat mama's boy! Fat mama's boy!" they taunted. The beating was so bad, he spent a week in a coma, and the doctors didn't know if he'd live or die. Helpless, Bubby cooked all day and all night, praying for his recovery, hoping the smells of her mushroom barley soup, stuffed peppers, and sponge cakes, which she schlepped all the way from to the hospital, would revive him. When he awoke, Bubby was standing there with a banquet, fully believing in the healing powers of Jewish food. My Bubby fed my dad bite after bite while he was in the hospital, feeding him but never telling him she loved him. My dad wanted to feel comforted by all the wonderful food she had worked so hard to prepare, but he felt angry. He wanted to be thin. He wanted to be popular. He wanted to have self-confidence. The very food that brought him such extreme pleasure caused him to be bigger than other kids, leading to ridicule and worse, landing him in the hospital. Even the doctors were alarmed by his weight. But Bubby said, "It's just baby fat. He'll grow out of it." But as he got bigger, his cravings for food as well as his need to be thin and popular intensified. When my dad dieted, he felt like he was betraying my grandmother and dissolving the one bond they shared. My dad felt if they were not talking about the food, the room was silent, so he made jokes, most of which Bubby did not understand. Conversation seemed to flow so easily between his brother Melvin and their mother. My dad wondered why it couldn't be like that for him. Of course, at 6 years old, I didn't know any of this. I didn't understand the relationship between my father, my grandmother, and food. I just knew that Bubby Mary stuffed me to the gills, and now I had to sit in the den and watch Tom Jones all by myself. I asked if I could shuffle the cards for her and her friends, but she hurried me out of the room with half a loaf of banana bread and a box of old photographs that she said I could look through. The bread was delicious with big, sweet chunks of bananas. I ate the entire loaf. Not so much because I was hungry, but because I didn't want anyone to be mad at me. My dad once told me he would get in trouble if he ever left the crumb, so I made sure not to leave one single crumb. I tried to watch Tom Jones, but I was bored. I kept peeking my head out of the room, hoping Bubby would include me. I kept smiling at all her friends. Beauty said my smile was contagious, but Bubby seemed happier with me in the other room. "You don't want to miss Tom Jones singing his biggest hit. It's not unusual," she said, sending me away with an ice cream parfait with Rainbow Jimmy's strawberry syrup and a cherry on top. "This should entertain you for a while." But I was lonely, not hungry. I tried to finish the cool treat to please Bubby, but my body said no, and before I could take one more bite, I was shivering. Before I knew what was happening, there was vomit all over Bubby's new couch. I remembered what my dad told me, how Bubby worked so hard to put food on the table, and how Beauty told me to be a good girl. Panicked, I crept towards the bathroom. If I could just clean everything up, no one would know what happened, and nobody would be disappointed in me. I quietly shut the door behind me, hearing Bubby Mary called, "I got rugula!"